Let's apply these textures to the various parts of the body that we've defined so far. And the first step in doing that is reordering our project a little bit here. We've got layer 1, which is one of the texture layers. We just pasted in. I'm going to drag that above what's currently called Color Fill 2, just so we can clearly see what's going on. Change the name of that layer to Body. And I'm going to turn off these topmost layers for now. Let's focus on layer 1, where I'm going to resize, a little Command-T action there, this layer so that it better covers the silhouette and is properly scaled to the silhouette that we're going to be applying this to. That looks pretty good. And of course, we're going to borrow the transparency of the silhouette. Once again, Option on Mac, Alt on Windows, click on the line, and you can kind of see where we're going to start to go with this. But right now we've applied a very flat texture to a very curvy model, and it would be nice to actually conform these cracks to the shape of the body beneath. And all that's going to take is a little bit of distortion along the edges. And to do that, we're going to jump into the Liquify tool, one of my favorite filters inside of Photoshop. Liquify is incredibly useful. I'm going to apply it here. We can see the texture, but you can also see kind of a problem of working in Liquify, as it can be difficult to see exactly what's going on. That is, unless you know how to use this interface. Tucked away in the bottom right-hand corner of the interface, out of view on my small screen here, so let me move this over and up, there we go, is the option to show the backdrop. When we click on Show Backdrop, you get these options to either use all layers or choose a layer that you want to use. In our case, we can just choose Body. Mode behind is fine. Feel free to play with the different settings to see what they look like, but in our case, behind is good. And a value of about 45 or even 40 is going to do real well for us. And if you've been following along, you can see on your screen what's going on here. But in order for me to show this to you, I'll have to bring this back on screen, and you can see the results of those adjustments that we made. The texture that we're looking to distort is now seen in front of the silhouette that we're attempting to distort it onto. Okay? So now we're free to use Liquify, and we've got this little bit of background suggestion here to tell us what to do. And what I'm going to do is just use our basic little smear tool, the Forward Warp, which acts like the old Photoshop smear tool, only a little bit nicer. Our brush size is about 60. That's actually a pretty good start point. If you're following along and have changed these values, you should probably adjust yours down to about this size, and a brush density of 50, brush pressure of 30. All of that looks okay. I am going to zoom in a little bit to give ourselves a more detailed view, and spacebar drag to position just the arm. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to click, and I'm going to drag up along the edges. As before, this is an artistic process. You're going to need to eyeball this and make sure that it looks the way you want it to look. But I'm going to basically drag the details along the edges from the shoulder towards the hand without trying to get into the center. And what that's going to do is it's going to gently curve the texture as if it's wrapped around a more cylindrical arm shape. And we can continue that, dragging from bottom to top, along this entire silhouette. You may find yourself in some places where you want to drag in the opposite direction based on what you see. Don't worry too much about what's up in the face. We're going to be getting rid of that. And you may find that you may occasionally want to increase your brush size in order to bring on some more details that you wish were in the image, like bringing on a little bit more texture that happens to be cropped off. That's pretty good. Now decrease our brush size again. I'm using the bracket keys for this, just like the regular brushes inside Photoshop. Once again, back down to about 60. Now click and drag, kind of conform to the shape. Same thing here. This is about the most boring thing you're going to watch me do, but it really doesn't take that long, because all you need is a suggestion to really sell the effect. And thankfully, since we've got Show Mask turned on, we only have to distort the areas that we're really confident about, and those are the parts that are towards the edge of the silhouette. And once I'm happy with what I've done, I'm pretty happy here. Just for good measure, take one drag down the center to round out the leg a little bit. That's pretty good. Click OK. And now you can see the results. The texture now gently looks as if, instead of being completely flat, it's mapped around the shape of the body a little bit. You can kind of see the texture following the contours of our model. It really does help to sell the effect. So that looks great. Now, because we've connected the transparency of these two layers together, the foreground is picking up the inner glow, which looks pretty good. But we actually want a little bit more to show through than that. So the next thing we're going to do to our texture layer is change its blend mode to screen. And we're mostly doing that so that we can see an area that we want to mask, something that we want to clean up. And I'm going to come down here, click on the Add Vector Mask button, grab my paintbrush, hit the X key to switch our background to foreground because I want to be painting with black. And I'm going to paint out the elements that are on top of the head here to restore our dancer's face. And anything that kind of looks out of place, this is a good time to fix it. I think this one crack going through the hair doesn't really work. And this is probably going to be obscured by the forearm, but I also don't want these cracks going down into the hair either. So let's neaten that up a little bit. That looks pretty good. We may find down the road we want to adjust the transparency of some of these elements, and I don't really want this in the fingers, so I'm going to brush that out as well. And the toes look just fine. In fact, this element here almost makes it look as if our model is wearing a leotard. So if you wanted to go back into Liquify and fix that, you could. But in essence, this isn't really going to matter very much because there's going to be a big fire effect down here that's going to obscure the feet anyway. So we're going to leave this as is and pronounce this pretty good. And now basically all we have to do is the same thing with the leg and the arm. So let's turn on our leg layer and the texture above it. And knowing that I'm going to need this texture for the arm as well, I'm going to hold down the Option key, Alt on Windows, click and drag up a copy above our arm to duplicate that layer. Turn it off for now. Come back to our layer 2, which we want to texturize onto our leg here. So I'm going to connect these together. And now let's add the Command key on the Mac, Control on Windows, to access our Move tool. And I'm going to pull this texture around into this layer now until I find a nice portion of the texture that I like. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Maybe need to shrink this down just a bit. Zoom out a little bit more so I can get to my corners. But not too much. Zoom back in for a little bit of detail. I want to try to sort of connect seams together, so I like the way that these fit. And we're going to do the same Liquify trick on the leg as we did on the body, which is fine, and that will make the rest of this look pretty good. So I like the detail on this leg. Let's hit the Return key to accept it. We'll jump into Liquify. And we can actually see our leg selected down here. I'm going to zoom in a couple of clicks, pan up, and as before, let's drag from bottom to top, to add a little bit of contour to our texture map. If you find this a little too confusing visually, you might want to consider changing some of the backdrop settings a little bit, because I think we're picking up just a bit of another copy of our layer. I don't have to actually see the bottom right corner to know that the settings probably aren't exactly where we left them. So let's adjust this down. Actually, I'm going to curve the foot in the other direction. So let's bring that around this way. That'll look a little more realistic. Just a little bit of noodling. A little bit of noodling around. Get that seam looking good. Let's bring this around. And once again, I'm going to bring my brush size up big enough to pull in some of these elements to just define slightly the back of the leg here. That's all I need right there. Just that. I'll click OK. And we're looking pretty good here. Actually, I'm going to touch up this leg a little bit more. I'm not completely happy with these details right here. So a few more clicks to adjust this curve. Click OK. And that looks better to my eye. Now once again, we're going to need to do a little bit of mask work, so click with the mask tool. We still have our paintbrush selected. Now I can come up here and maybe get rid of a couple of these little details that don't quite look right. And mask off the feet altogether so that the feet look like they belong in the same scene. Now the leg isn't picking up the glow because if you look closely, you'll see that the glow on the leg is applied inside a smart object. But that's okay. As soon as we change the blend mode of this layer to screen, we're going to get our glow back. And now that looks fantastic. That's exactly what I'm going for. And you can probably guess that we're going to now do the same thing with the forearm. To finish up this texture map, let's zoom back out with Command 0. Drag my window back open again. Access our Move tool. I'm going to right-click on the texture here to choose Layer to Copy. Make sure that we're operating on the correct layer. Once again, Command-T, but I'm going to move outside of the selection and rotate the texture a bit so that it's perpendicular to the angle of the arm. Once again, I'll Option-click to marry these together. And let's play a little bit with the scale to get it down so that it's comparable to the rest of the textures on our model. And then we just drag it around until we find the combination that we like. And I'm going to say, let's say that this looks pretty good to my eye. Not too much, not too little. Hit Return. Once again, go into Filter, Liquify. And now we really are starting to get a little too complicated to see what's going on in here. So once again, I'm going to drag this over and up. And instead of using all layers, we're going to choose Arm. So when I come back in, you can now see that we're just using the arm as a silhouette layer. I'm going to zoom in on that. And let's brush from the fingertips up towards the shoulder this time. This we're going to mask off, but we can have a little bit on the hand. Fingertips up, fingertips up. I know I sound like the guy with the fuzzy hair who used to paint on PBS. It's not really what I'm going for, but what are you going to do? Let's bring a little bit more of this in. That's good. And OK. And there we have it. Once more, Layer, Transfer Mode, Screen. I'm going to hit the F key a couple of times, and you can see we've got a beautifully textured model here. Ooh, I do need to adjust a little bit of masking here because, as I mentioned, I wanted to get rid of the glow on the fingertips, although it's not so bad here. But just because I said I was, I'm gonna, for consistency's sake. And let's paint that out a little bit. Maybe just a bit under here. So it looks as if we have some glow on the back of her hand, but it doesn't extend around to her palm or her fingers. If we zoom in a bit, you can see the detail on this holds up really, really well. Because we went the extra mile and processed the cracks so that they don't just look like blown up pen and ink drawings, and also applied the gradient map, we've got this wonderful crunchy detail moving through our model here that I'm very, very pleased with. And now that we've got the texturizing done, we move on to the last step in this chapter, which is all about setting our model on fire. And really, that's a pretty easy portion. Shouldn't take long at all. Let's blow things back up to full screen here. I don't need my Ernst Haeckel layer anymore, and it was so easy to create, I'm not even going to save it. So I'm going to click the close button and don't save.